The world knows Alex Chen as the visionary founder of ConnectSphere. They see the polished interviews, the successful product launches, and the impressive company headquarters. But what they don't see are the countless nights that came before. They don't see the version of Alex from years ago, hunched over a cluttered desk in a tiny apartment. The glow of a computer screen was often the only light, illuminating a face etched with both fatigue and intense focus. The city outside would go to sleep, but Alex's work was just beginning. Sleep was a luxury, something to be earned after one more bug was fixed, one more line of code was written, or one more email was sent into the void, hoping for a reply. These were the unseen hours, the silent and solitary moments that truly defined the journey. It was a time filled with the constant hum of a struggling laptop and the smell of stale coffee. The glamour of entrepreneurship was a distant myth. The reality was a relentless grind, a daily battle against overwhelming odds. Every morning started not with a sense of excitement, but with a heavy feeling of the monumental task ahead. The world saw a future success story in the making, but Alex saw only a mountain of work, a dwindling bank account, and the persistent whisper of doubt that asked if this was all a terrible mistake. It was a period of profound isolation, where the dream was the only companion. The sacrifice was immense, and it was woven into every aspect of life. Friends would call to go out, but Alex had to decline. Family gatherings were missed. The world outside the small apartment seemed to move on, while Alex remained locked in a cycle of work, worry, and more work. The concept of a weekend disappeared completely. Days blurred into nights, and weekdays blended into weekends without any distinction. This wasn't just about working hard. It was about surrendering a part of oneself to the idea, believing in it so fiercely that nothing else mattered. It was a lonely path, one that few people could truly understand. This relentless dedication was the foundation, the invisible scaffolding upon which ConnectSphere was built. Before the venture capital funding, before the first major news article, there was just Alex. There was just the quiet determination to solve a problem, to create something meaningful from scratch. The world would later celebrate the outcome, the finished product. But the real story, the one that holds all the important lessons, lies in those early days. It lies in the quiet persistence, the unwavering belief in a vision when no one else was watching, and the sheer will to keep going when giving up seemed like the only logical choice. The idea for ConnectSphere didn't arrive in a flash of genius. It wasn't a sudden world-changing revelation. Instead, it was born from a simple personal frustration. Alex was working a stable but unfulfilling job at a large tech corporation. Day after day, Alex noticed how disconnected teams were. People in the same building, sometimes on the same floor, struggled to collaborate effectively. Information was lost in long email chains. Projects were delayed because the right people weren't talking to each other. Alex saw a problem that everyone complained about, but no one was truly trying to solve in a human-centric way. It was a persistent, nagging issue that sparked a quiet curiosity. This curiosity grew into an obsession. Alex started spending evenings and weekends, not just thinking about the problem, but sketching out solutions. The first notebooks were filled with messy diagrams and flowcharts. It wasn't about building a company at first. It was about solving a puzzle. How could you make professional communication feel more natural, more intuitive, and more efficient? How could you break down the digital walls that prevented genuine teamwork? Alex talked to friends, former colleagues, and anyone who would listen, gathering stories of their own frustrations. Each conversation added another layer to the idea, refining it from a vague concept into something more concrete and tangible. The initial code was clumsy. It was a patchwork of different programming languages and open-source tools that Alex was learning on the fly. The first prototype was far from the sleek platform that ConnectSphere is today. It was buggy, slow, and had a very limited set of features, but it worked. Just barely. Alex created a simple version that allowed a small group of users to create a shared space and post updates. It was a small step, but it was proof that the core concept was viable. This early, fragile version was the first real evidence that the idea could be more than just drawings in a notebook. It was the first breath of life for the project. Leaving the security of a full-time job was the hardest decision Alex had ever made. It meant giving up a steady paycheck, health insurance, and a predictable career path. It was a leap of faith into a completely uncertain future. Many friends and family members advised against it, calling it a reckless gamble. but the pull of the idea was too strong to ignore. The frustration with the status quo and the belief in a better way to work had become a driving force. So with a small amount of personal savings and a heart full of nervous excitement, Alex took the plunge, leaving the corporate world behind to chase a challenging and uncertain dream. The term garage startup often sounds romantic, but the reality for Alex was anything but. The headquarters of the fledgling company was a small converted corner of a shared apartment's living room. It wasn't a spacious garage filled with whiteboards and brilliant engineers. It was a cramped space with a second-hand desk, a wobbly chair, and a tangle of power cords. The rent was a constant source of anxiety. Every month felt like a race against time, trying to make progress before the savings ran out completely. The glamour was non-existent. The days were long, monotonous, and filled with 1,000 small, frustrating tasks that were essential to keeping the project alive. The challenges were not just technical, they were logistical and emotional. Alex had to be the CEO, the lead programmer, the customer support agent, and the janitor all at once. One moment, Alex would be wrestling with a complex server issue. The next, Alex would be trying to fix a bug reported by one of the few early users. Then, it was time to draft emails to potential investors, most of which would go unanswered. The constant context switching was mentally draining. There was no team to delegate tasks to, no mentor to ask for advice. Every single problem, big or small, landed squarely on Alex's shoulders, creating a heavy burden of responsibility. Moments of near failure were frequent. There was the time a critical database crashed, wiping out several days of user data. Alex stayed up for 48 hours straight, painstakingly recovering what could be saved and personally emailing every affected user to apologize. The feeling of letting people down was crushing. Another time, a potential angel investor, after weeks of promising conversations, suddenly pulled out, sending Alex into a spiral of despair. The financial runway, which was already short, suddenly seemed to vanish. These setbacks felt like personal failures, each one chipping away at Alex's confidence and resolve. It felt like the universe was sending a clear signal to just give up. Yet it was in these moments of intense pressure that the true character of the journey was forged. The struggle made the mission more real. It wasn't an abstract business plan anymore. It was a daily fight for survival. Alex learned to be resourceful out of pure necessity. Free software trials were used to their absolute limit. Every dollar was stretched as far as it could possibly go. The experience taught Alex resilience in a way that no business school ever could. It was a harsh and unforgiving education, but it was also the most valuable. The garage days were a trial by fire that stripped away all illusions and left only the raw, unshakable core of the founder's determination. Building a startup from nothing is not just a professional endeavor. It is a deeply personal one that demands enormous sacrifice. For Alex, the cost was measured in relationships. Friendships that were once strong began to fade. Invitations were constantly turned down with a hurried apology about being too busy with work. Over time, the invitations stopped coming. Friends couldn't understand the all-consuming nature of the project. From the outside, it looked like Alex was just being distant and unavailable. The loneliness was profound. The very community that Alex was trying to build with ConnectSphere felt a million miles away from the isolated reality of building it. The financial strain was a constant, suffocating pressure. Alex's personal savings, which had seemed like a reasonable cushion at first, dwindled with alarming speed. Every expense was scrutinized. Lunches were instant noodles. Dinners were often whatever was cheapest at the grocery store. The stress of watching the bank balance shrink created a perpetual state of anxiety. Alex took on freelance coding gigs at night, working on other people's projects just to make enough money to pay rent and keep the lights on. This meant even less sleep and more time away from the core work of building ConnectSphere. It was a vicious cycle of being too broke to focus on the startup and too busy with the startup to make money. Health was another casualty of the relentless hustle. Sleep became an afterthought, something to be caught in short, infrequent bursts. Nutrition was poor and exercise was non-existent. The constant stress and lack of rest took a visible toll. Alex was always tired, often irritable and prone to getting sick. There were days when the physical and mental exhaustion was so complete that getting out of bed felt like an impossible task. The passion for the project was still there, but the body and mind were screaming for a break. It was a dangerous balancing act, pushing oneself to the absolute limit while trying to avoid a complete burnout or breakdown. The emotional cost was perhaps the heaviest of all. The journey was a roller coaster of extreme highs and crushing lows. A small piece of positive feedback from a user could bring a moment of intense joy, but a harsh rejection from an investor could trigger days of self-doubt. Alex constantly questioned the decision to start this journey. Was it worth the sacrifice? Was the idea good enough? Was Alex good enough to make it happen? These questions echoed in the quiet hours of the night, fueling a sense of imposter syndrome. The dream that was once a source of inspiration had also become a source of immense emotional pain and uncertainty. Amidst the constant struggle and self-doubt, there were small moments that provided just enough fuel to keep going. The first real glimmer of hope came not from an investor, but from a single, unsolicited email. It was from a user Alex had never met, a graphic designer from a small agency in another country. The designer wrote a long, detailed message explaining how her team had started using the very basic prototype of ConnectSphere. She described how it had genuinely improved their workflow, making their remote collaboration smoother and more enjoyable. She wasn't just a user. She was a fan. She even included a list of thoughtful suggestions for new features she would love to see. That one email changed everything. For weeks, Alex had been working in a vacuum, coding features and fixing bugs with very little feedback. It was easy to believe that no one was paying attention, that the work was disappearing into the digital ether. But this message was concrete proof that the product was solving a real problem for real people. Alex printed out the email and taped it to the wall above the desk. It became a powerful talisman against the waves of despair. Whenever things got tough, whenever an investor said no, Alex would look at that piece of paper. It was a reminder that the mission was not just a personal obsession, it had a purpose. This small victory energized Alex to engage more with the tiny but growing user base. Alex started spending an hour every day personally emailing every new person who signed up. It wasn't a scalable strategy, but it was incredibly valuable. Alex asked them about their work, their challenges, and how they were using the tool. These conversations were a goldmine of insights. They helped Alex understand the user's needs on a much deeper level. This direct interaction built a strong sense of community around the product. Users felt heard, and they became passionate advocates, spreading the word to their own networks. This small but loyal following became the startup's greatest asset. When a major bug threatened to derail the platform, it was these early users who were the most patient and understanding. They reported issues with helpful details and cheered Alex on while the fixes were being implemented. This wasn't just a transactional relationship between a company and its customers. It felt like a collaborative project, a group of people working together to build something they all believed in. These small victories, these human connections, were the sparks of light in the darkness. They were the moments that reaffirmed the why behind all the sacrifice and kept the dream alive. Every startup journey has a moment where it feels like the story is about to end. For Alex and ConnectSphere, that moment was honestly a perfect storm of disaster. The project had been running on fumes for months, and the last of Alex's personal savings was gone. A final desperate pitch had been made to a small venture capital firm that had shown some initial interest. They had promised a decision by the end of the month. The rent was due, the server bills were piling up, and this investment was the only lifeline left. The entire future of the company hung on this one decision. The weight of that pressure was immense. The day the decision was expected, an email arrived. It was not a celebratory call, but a short, formal message. The firm had decided to pass. The reason they gave was that the market was too crowded and the product was not differentiated enough. The words were like a physical blow. It felt like a final judgment on months of tireless work. The hope that had been keeping Alex going for so long was extinguished in an instant. Staring at the screen, Alex felt a profound sense of emptiness. It wasn't just a rejection. It was the end of the road. There was no money left. There were no other prospects. It was over. As if that wasn't enough, disaster struck on the technical front as well. That same evening, a major cloud service provider, the one hosting ConnectSphere's entire infrastructure, had a massive region-wide outage. The platform went down. For the small community of users who relied on it, the tool they had come to love simply vanished. Panicked emails started flooding Alex's inbox. "Is ConnectSphere gone forever?" one user asked. The timing felt cruelly ironic. The company was financially bankrupt, and now it was technically offline as well. It was the lowest point Alex had ever experienced, a moment of complete and utter failure on all fronts. Sitting in the dark, surrounded by the silence of a dead server and an empty bank account, Alex contemplated giving up for good. It seemed like the most logical thing to do. The world was sending every possible signal that this venture was a mistake. The dream had turned into a nightmare. Alex drafted a final email to the user base, a message explaining that the service would be shutting down permanently. It was a message of defeat, an apology for failing them. But with a finger hovering over the send button, something stopped Alex. A flicker of defiance, a stubborn refusal to let the story end this way, began to burn through the despair. In that moment of absolute rock bottom, with the shutdown email drafted and ready to send, Alex's perspective began to shift. The crushing weight of failure had, in a strange way, become liberating. When you have absolutely nothing left to lose, there is a certain kind of freedom. The fear of failure, which had been a constant companion, was gone because failure had already happened. All the worst-case scenarios had come true. The company was broke, the platform was down, and the investors had said no. There was nowhere to go but up, or to at least try. This realization sparked a surprising and powerful surge of clarity. Instead of sending the email of defeat, Alex deleted it. A new determination took its place. The problem wasn't the product itself. The core users loved it. The problem was the business model and the pitch. The rejection from the investors, while painful, contained a kernel of truth. The market was crowded. The pitch wasn't differentiated enough. Alex had been so focused on building the product that the story around it had been neglected. This harsh feedback was not a death sentence. It was a critical lesson. It was a chance to rebuild, not from scratch, but from a foundation of hard-won experience and a small, loyal user base. The first step was to get the platform back online. Alex spent the next few hours working with a singular focus, finding a workaround for the cloud outage. It was a temporary, messy fix, but it worked. When ConnectSphere came back online, Alex sent a different kind of email to the users. It was honest and transparent. It explained the technical difficulties and the financial struggles. It didn't promise a perfect future, but it did promise to keep fighting for the product they had all come to value. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Users offered words of support. A few even asked if they could donate money to help keep the servers running. This outpouring of support was the ultimate validation. It was more powerful than any investor's check. It showed that ConnectSphere was more than just a piece of software. It was a community. This renewed sense of purpose gave Alex the strength to face the challenges ahead. The doubt was still there, but it was no longer paralyzing. It was now a tool for critical thinking, a way to question assumptions and find better answers. Resilience, Alex learned, was not about avoiding failure. It was about having the courage to stand up one more time after being knocked down, armed with the lessons learned from the fall. Fueled by the support of the user community, Alex knew that simply continuing on the same path was not an option. A change was needed, a significant strategic shift known in the startup world as a pivot. The feedback from the failed investor pitch echoed loudly, not differentiated enough. The current version of ConnectSphere was a general collaboration tool competing with dozens of other similar products. The key insight came from rereading the hundreds of emails from the most passionate users. A pattern emerged. The people who loved the product most were not large corporations. They were small, creative teams, design agencies, freelance collectives, and independent studios. This realization was the seed of the pivot. Instead of trying to be a tool for everyone, ConnectSphere would become the best collaboration tool in the world for a specific niche creative professionals. This meant rethinking the entire product roadmap. Features that were generic would be de-emphasized. New features designed specifically for visual collaboration, like shared whiteboards, image annotation tools, and portfolio integrations, would become the top priority. It was a risky move. It meant potentially alienating some of the existing users who didn't fit this new profile, but it also offered a clear path to differentiation and a way to build something truly unique and valuable. The pivot was painful. It felt like abandoning parts of the original vision, the one Alex had sacrificed so much for. It required admitting that the initial strategy was wrong. This was a blow to the ego, but it was a necessary one. Alex spent weeks talking to creative professionals, understanding their specific pain points and workflows. The product was redesigned from the ground up with their needs in mind. The new messaging was focused and clear. ConnectSphere was no longer just another communication tool. It was the collaboration hub for creative teams. This new focus gave the company a sharp, compelling identity. This renewed clarity and focus made all the difference. Alex began reaching out to angel investors again, but this time with a much stronger story. The pitch was no longer about a generic tool in a crowded market. It was about a purpose-built solution for a passionate, underserved community. The evidence was compelling: a dedicated user base that loved the product, clear insights into their needs, and a focused plan for the future. An early-stage investor who specialized in creative software saw the potential. After a series of intense meetings, they agreed to provide the seed funding that ConnectSphere so desperately needed. It wasn't a huge amount, but it was enough. It was the breakthrough. The seed funding marked the end of one chapter and the beginning of another. It was the moment the world would later point to as the start of ConnectSphere's success. But Alex knew the truth. The success was not born in that conference room when the investment was secured. It was forged much earlier in the crucible of the unseen struggle. It was forged in the lonely late nights fueled by cheap coffee and a stubborn belief in an idea. It was forged in the financial anxiety, the personal sacrifices, and the constant battle against self-doubt. It was forged in the moment of near collapse, when giving up felt like the only option left. Those early days of hardship were not obstacles to success. They were the very ingredients of it. The lack of resources forced a level of creativity and resourcefulness that would become a core part of the company's culture. The direct, personal engagement with the first users built a foundation of community and loyalty that no marketing budget could ever buy. The painful rejections and failures provided invaluable lessons that shaped the company's strategy and ultimately led to the successful pivot. Every setback, every tear, and every moment of despair was a stepping stone on the path to the breakthrough. The struggle was not a detour, it was the way. Today, when Alex shares the story of ConnectSphere's origins, the focus is not on the triumphant moments, it is on the hidden hustle. It is a story about resilience, about the importance of listening to your users, and about the courage to change course when necessary. It's a reminder that the polished surface of success that the world sees is always built upon a messy, difficult, and often invisible foundation of hard work. The journey taught Alex that entrepreneurship is less about having a brilliant idea and more about having the grit and tenacity to navigate the inevitable storms that come with trying to bring that idea to life. The legacy of those early struggles lives on in the DNA of ConnectSphere. The company remains deeply connected to its community, prioritizing user feedback above all else. It retains a frugal and resourceful mindset, even in its success. And at its heart, it is driven by the same spirit of resilience that carried its founder through the darkest days. The story of Alex Chen is a testament to the fact that the most meaningful victories are not the ones that come easy. They are the ones that are earned through perseverance, forged in the fire of adversity, and built on the quiet, unseen hustle that happens long before the spotlight ever shines.